Welcome to Dreamy's Country Kitchen. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm making a pot roast dinner with baked mac and cheese, mixed greens, and candied yams. Stay tuned if you'd like to see how I prepared it. Here are the ingredients I decided to use to season my pot roast. I have some garlic, chives, black peppercorn, onion salt, pink salt, some beef bouillon, Brazilian steakhouse, soy sauce, red wine vinegar. You can also choose what you'd like to add in. Here is all of my seasonings combined. I added a little bit of brown sugar to the mix. I'm just going to mix this around a little bit so it can be evenly combined. Here I have my washed potatoes, some thyme, garlic, carrots, onions, and some beef broth that I prepared to put into my pot roast. Now I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on the pot roast. I'm going to put a generous amount of seasoning on my pot roast and make sure I cover both sides. Just gently pat it in. My meat is now ready to brown just for a little bit, not cook, but just brown. I have some olive oil in this pan, and I'm going to gently brown both sides of my roast. After your meat is thoroughly browned, not cooked, but just browned, I'm going to add in onions, garlic. If you want to add the thyme in, you can add the thyme in. And I'm just going to let it saute a little bit in the oil and juices that was in the bottom of the pot from the meat. Once your onions and garlic have sauteed, you can add in your beef broth. And I'm going to add in some red wine vinegar into my broth. That's optional. And I also added in soy sauce and the chives, a little bit of the garlic. I'm going to add a little bit more. Now that my broth and gravy has come together, I'm going to place the meat back inside of the broth and put it in the oven on 350 for at least an hour and a half. I did cover it so it wouldn't dry out. Next, I'm going to begin to make my mixed greens. I have kale and collard greens, cut up onions, smoked turkey necks, Sazon, collard green seasoning, garlic, peppercorn, and vinegar. I usually like to use apple cider vinegar, but I ran out, so that's what I'm going to be using instead. I ran out of my chicken broth, so I'm going to be using this Knorr chicken bouillon today. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons into 4 cups of boiling water. And it depends on how much you're making. You may have to increase the water. Once the broth has come to a boil, you can add in your smoked turkey neck and your onions and let that boil for a while, and then you can start adding in your kale or collard greens. I'm in a rush, so I'm adding them all in together. Then once you've added everything in, you can go ahead and cover it up. Some people add in their seasonings from the very beginning. I add mine in halfway through. So now I'm adding in my seasoning. And it all depends on the texture that you want your greens to be. If you want them soft, if you want them to have a little bite. It really just depends on how you want them, and that's how long you would cook them for. I normally cook them for maybe 2 hours. and don't keep opening the pot. So I'm adding in my vinegar now, and then I'm going to cover it back up. So now it's time to check and see how tender our roast is. If it's tender enough for you, you can add in your carrots, potatoes, or whatever other vegetables you want to add in. Now that I've put all that in, I'm going to cover it up and put it back in the oven to continue to bake. So here are my ingredients that I'm going to use for my baked mac and cheese. I'm using shells and not elbows, minced garlic, some pink Himalayan sea salt, paprika, chicken bouillon, onion powder, evap milk, 1 stick of butter, my blended cheeses, Sazon, and some black peppercorn. You can also use whatever seasonings you'd like to use. I am horrible with measuring for the chicken bouillon. I usually pour some in the cap and toss it in the water. It's about 4 cups of water. You can use an amount that you would want. Just be careful because sometimes it's a little salty. I'm going to add in some pink Himalayan salt. I'm going to bring this to a boil with my noodles and cook it until al dente. Okay, so I have my noodles draining right now, and now I'm just going to make this flourless, eggless roux that I got from Kimmy Creations. It's got 1 stick of melted butter. I've added in some minced garlic. I've added in the various seasonings I showed you guys before, and I melted that all down together, and it's thoroughly combined. Now I'm going to add in my cheeses. Not all of the cheese that I had out on the counter. I'm just adding in like about a quarter of it. Once your cheese is melted and your roux is creamy, you can turn off the stove. I have this beautiful dish I've been waiting to use. It's like a casserole dish by Pioneer Woman. I got it at Walmart. I've been waiting to use it for a long time, so I'm going to do it for my mac and cheese. So I'm going to dump in my drained noodles. I'm going to add some of that roux that I prepared earlier. Just going to give it a good stir, and then I'm going to add in the cheese and stir it around. I like extra everything, so I'm putting chives on top of mine. For the last 10 to 15 minutes of the baking time, I'm going to leave it uncovered so that my cheese can have a little bit of color to it. These are the ingredients I'll be using for my candied yams. I'm going to be doing them on the stovetop this time, not in the oven. I'm going to melt my 1.5 sticks of butter down on a medium fire. Next, I'm going to be adding in my brown sugar. Two teaspoons of cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of nutmeg. You can add more if you like. Now I'm going to go in with my maple syrup. Going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of rum extract. Going to add in a pinch of salt. Now that everything is fully incorporated, I'm going to add in my sliced sweet potatoes. Next, we're going to cover it and let it cook on medium Once they're nice and tender, we can turn the stove off. Now it's time to check on my pot roast. Seems like it's done. The baked mac and cheese is ready as well. I decided to add some marshmallows on top of my sweet potatoes while they're on the stove. Final look at the pot roast. I was too lazy to shred up the beef and I was starving, so I just went ahead and made myself a plate. If you made it all the way through, thanks for watching. See you next time.